that we are going to have a running back committee in 2022. What does that mean for Elijah Mitchell, and what does that mean for the rest of the committee? More after this.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on 3. 1, 2, 3, dominate.
What's going on, everybody? I've got my brother, So Real Suneil, over there. We're here talking some 49ers. It is one day before training camp. Suneil, how are you doing, man?
Doing fantastic, man. Every time I come on your channel, that intro video has me pumped, man. Especially the Fred Warner part. I just love it, bro.
Yeah, I mean, you and me both. I love it a lot. I'm definitely excited because you know what? It just tells me that football is right around the corner. Like I said, training camp begins tomorrow. Open practice begins on Wednesday. And for those of you that don't know, I will be at open practice on Wednesday. I've got all my tickets and all that kind of stuff booked. I will be there, and I will be giving you the information when I come back. But, Suneil, let's start talking about this running back committee ahead of training camp. One of the places where the 49ers likely will have some battles. Matt Mayoko, obviously the 49ers insider, said that the 49ers appear to be more determined to deploy a running back committee in 2022. Now, they drafted Tyrion Davis-Price in the 3rd round. They have guys like Trey Sermon and Jeff Wilson Jr. They have undrafted rookie Jordan Mason. What are your thoughts currently on the running back group, and do you think that this is the right situation to do?
Yeah, I mean, one, I do think so. Like, I really believe, just off of the numbers itself, the 49ers under Kyle Shanahan, their most successful year was 2019, where they ended up finishing 2nd overall as far as total rushing. They were averaging a little over 140 yards per game. And that was the 3-headed monster back then, where Coleman was coming out as the starter, and then, Mostert and Breida. Earlier in the year, Mostert, and then Breida, or earlier in the year, Breida, and then Mostert took over later on in the season. And that's where they had the most success. And obviously that offense was good enough to get into the Super Bowl. And, we even saw a game where that rushing attack behind, Mostert was able to pretty much dominate an NFC divisional game with the Packers. So I do think it is the right thing to do as far as running back by committee, especially since we saw so many injuries with that last year, especially with Elijah Mitchell, who obviously was carrying a ton last season. And, it led to him having to miss 6 games, I believe just personally with the workload. But the difference is, Rohan, for me, is this running back by committee would be different from the 2019 because there isn't necessarily that change of pace that was there in 2019, right? Coleman was a bruiser. Coleman was good at the 3rd down protection. And then they brought in the home run hitters in Breida and Mostert that had the track speed, which was, kind of like the 2 different looks that they were able to give defenses. In this case, it seems like a majority of the running back room with Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, TDP, and whomever that 4th is, whether it's Mason or Jeff Wilson Jr., especially if it's Jeff Wilson Jr., are all kind of cut out of the same cloth as far as the size, what they like to do as far as running styles, and, speed overall isn't necessarily track speed. So that's where it kind of is like, okay, how is this going to work out? Since you're not really giving the defense a different look, it's more about fresh bodies. But with the addition of Anthony Lynn, he's been very successful with using, running back by committee and been able to, have successful rushing attacks, even though maybe there's not just one bell cow just spreading the ball across whomever's, healthy and fresh at that moment.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I personally am of the belief that the 49ers would have had a running back committee in 2021 if the injuries hadn't occurred. Remember, Raheem Mostert went down in week 1 after 4 snaps. Jeff Wilson Jr. had an injury in the offseason that forced him to miss the first 10 weeks of the season with the torn meniscus. Then you have Trey Sermon, who was inactive for certain games, but also when he was and playing. Remember, he had that concussion, and he also was facing several things of his own. So you have injuries in this entire game, in this entire kind of group that forced Elijah Mitchell to carry more than expected. 11 games, 200 carries. That's way more on average than any 49ers running back had throughout the entirety of the Shanahan regime. There's only one other instance where a 49ers running back rushed for more than 200 carries in a season, and that was Carlos Hyde back in 2017 when Kyle Shanahan first inherited this roster and really didn't have any of his running backs that he preferred at his disposal. Remember, who were his guys that he brought in 2018? He didn't keep Carlos Hyde. Carlos Hyde didn't fit his mold. Instead, he brought in Jerick McKinnon. Instead, he brought in Tevin Coleman and guys who he was more comfortable with because they worked in the committee. Obviously, McKinnon didn't work out. Coleman was all right as well during his time with the 49ers. But remember, the 49ers aren't known to have, or at least Kyle Shanahan isn't known in this era since 2017, isn't known to really have 200 carry rushers. And that's why I think a running back committee is very, very vital for the 49ers in 2022, especially when you take in the injuries that Elijah Mitchell faced in 2021. Remember, he missed 6 games last year with several injuries. It's not like it was a 6-game period. He missed time in weeks. I think it was 3 and I forget. Sometime in the early part of the season, he missed 2 weeks. Then in the middle part of the season, he missed some time, and he also missed time later on as well. He missed time with various injuries and played through various injuries like his knee sprain. So that is one thing that I want the 49ers to combat. And that leads me to my next question, Suneil. Mitchell decrease in carries, or at least decrease in volume from last year. Who takes the increase in volume with the current room right now?
Yeah, and that's going to be a really interesting question. And I don't know if I'm being biased because this is my guy that I was really excited about when they drafted him last season. But I truly do believe that Trey Sermon is going to be that guy. And there's a few reasons why I feel that way, Rohan. One is I do think that Shanahan does tend to stay away from rookies and using them in bulk unless he has to, right? Even last year, Mostert was the starter. I do believe that maybe a guy like Jeff Wilson was going to be used a lot more, but he didn't come out as fresh. And, Mostert obviously got injured. And I think that's why we saw, Mitchell get the type of run that he does. But usually Kyle Shanahan likes going with the vet or the older person that's been in the system a little bit longer than the rookie. So in that case, I do think that Trey Sermon has a little bit of an edge over TDP for that reason alone. However, I also think with Trey Lance becoming the starter, and I think we're going to see a lot more of the shotgun, quote unquote pistol, whatever they want to call it, formation. I do think that that's where Trey Sermon has a lot of experience playing alongside a guy like Justin Fields in college at Ohio State. And we've seen how successful Trey Sermon was as far as a running back in college. He carried Ohio State on a multitude of those games. They obviously went very far with him there as a running back. And I think that's why the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan actually traded up to get him last year. So I do think that he's going to end up getting a bigger role. And he's shown flashes last season when he did get an opportunity. Hopefully he's come back and from what Shanahan has been saying, he has come back and has worked on the things that he needed to work on, that they were coaching him so hard on that kept him away from the field, it seems like. And I think he's been working hard. He's obviously putting out a lot of videos of him working hard in the offseason. I think all of that's going to bode well for him. And I do think that he's going to end up taking over and getting more carries from Elijah Mitchell and whomever else is in that running back room. And I expect him to have a pretty decent season and, be an impact player for the 49ers.
I think that's a fair assessment, right? We've seen a lot of workout videos, like you said. Trey Sermon, he's been working on that agility. He's kind of slimmed down compared to his 2021 frame. And maybe there were some concerns from the 49ers camp that he had not been in shape. And so maybe that's what 2021 was for. 2022, I think, also will be a year where Trey Sermon kind of puts himself into the 49ers offense. Sometimes at the early part of this offseason, some were concerned that Trey Sermon might not even make the roster and the 49ers might just cut ties because it would show some accountability that they had messed up with the pick. But I think that Trey Sermon is bound for somewhat of a role in 2022. What that is yet to be remained. And I think that training camp will really give us a good picture on who that running back 2 will be. I know you've pointed out a lot that your guy, Jack Hammer, said that Elijah Mitchell was the one really taking over in training camp last year. And hence, that's the guy who ended up starting for the 49ers when Raheem Mostert went down. So I'm excited to see who will be that number 2 guy. Will TDP get that chance early on in the 49ers system? And or will it be a guy like Trey Sermon, who has a year in the system, who was a good rusher back in his days, not only at Oklahoma, but also at Ohio State? And I think that it's really who can the system or who can the coaches trust more? Because it's not only Kyle Shanahan anymore. It's Anthony Lynn and how Anthony Lynn implements his offensive style. One other thing to note, Mike McDaniel, the 49ers run guru, is no longer there. He's replaced by Anthony Lynn. And so I think Anthony Lynn will have a lot more say in this equation as well, alongside Kyle Shanahan. It'll be interesting to see who he trusts the most.
Right.
RB2 right now.
And Bobby Turner isn't there this year as well. So it's really going to be focused in on Kyle Shanahan and Anthony Lynn. And we've seen Anthony Lynn have success with, a bruiser and a speedster just recently in, Detroit with Swift and Williams over there. He's also mentioned a guy like Mason, who he said has been showing out as well. So, maybe he's somebody who guts in there and gets some carries as well.
Exactly. And that kind of leads me to one other point, right? We talk about this running back 2. We talked about Elijah Mitchell and how he could see a decrease in carries. I want your thoughts on somewhat of a controversial topic that I put out there, and that was my belief. As of now, I personally don't believe that Elijah Mitchell will get 1,000 yards if the 49ers implement the running back committee as planned, and if Kyle Shanahan goes as he's gone in the past with his running backs. Do you think that statement's true? And if not, why so?
I mean, I think that's the safest bet, right? What you're saying is the safest bet, because when they go running back by committee, if we're using the 2019 model as far as how many carries and all that kind of stuff, you're talking about Elijah Mitchell having to average a lot of yards off of, getting eight carries per game, which I think 8 to 9 carries per game, which was what I think kept Coleman and I think Mostert ended up with throughout the year, which seems pretty tough because you're going to have to average right around 60 yards per game. So that's like an 8 yards per carry type situation. Under 8 yards doesn't seem very realistic. However, I do think that Elijah Mitchell has something that maybe no other running back has had in the Kyle Shanahan regime, and that is sure hands, right? That is somebody that Kyle Shanahan can trust with the ball that isn't going to fumble. He didn't fumble at all of last season, including the playoffs. He hasn't fumbled at all through college. So this is a very unique trait, Rohan. Very few running backs can claim that can go through a whole season without ever fumbling. And that's something that Elijah Mitchell has been able to do on a regular basis. So I do believe he can hit that 1,000-yard mark, and I do believe he will, because one, I think with the addition of Trey Lance as the starting quarterback, that is going to help out the rushing attack, because now it's 11 on 11. So defenders do have to be wary of what Trey Lance is going to be doing with the ball. So I think that is going to open up a little bit more time for the running backs when it comes to decision making. 2, I do believe Elijah Mitchell is going to be fully healthy, right? Last season, I don't think he expected to be able to start. He had to start. I don't think he expected to have to go into the season taking on that load. He ended up having to take on that load. And like you said, he was riddled with injuries. Even though he played 11 games and had a really successful season, even in a lot of those games, he was injured. So we haven't been able to see necessarily all of Elijah Mitchell, which is pretty nuts to hear because he had such a great season overall. So I do think the reduction in carries is going to give him an opportunity to stay fresher and stay healthy. healthier, which I think will lead to him being able to be more effective with the ball. And when we're talking about what it really means to have 1,000-yard season, it is a little bit easier than for previous years because they do have that extra added game, right? So over 17 games, you're averaging right under 60 yards per game. Let's say Elijah Mitchell gets around 12 carries per game. That means he has to average 4.9 yards per carry to be able to hit that mark. And he averaged 4.7 last year with a much heavier workload, injury riddled, all that kind of stuff with Jimmy Garoppolo as the quarterback. So for me, I think there's a lot of things that are working in his favor to be able to hit that 1,000-yard mark, even though he is going to get a reduction in carries. It's just about the healthy. And, it is a big if he could stay healthy throughout the whole season, because clearly he wasn't able to last year. But I am believing that he is going to stay healthy. So I do believe he's going to hit that 1,000 yards.
And that's a very fair point. If Elijah Mitchell remains healthy in 2022, I think that you can definitely make that argument. Like you said, though, it's a big if. When we look at the running backs in the Shanahan system from 2018 onwards, excluding the 2017 year in which Carlos Hyde was placed just because they didn't really have other running backs on the roster, there hasn't been a rusher that has rushed for over 156 carries in a single season. Matt Breida had that number in 2018 when there was a two-headed monster, and then obviously there was a three-headed monster with Breida, Coleman, and Mostert in 2019. I'm envisioning a 2 to 3-headed monster as well with Mitchell, Sermon, and Tyrion Davis-Price. However, I do think Mitchell will get the majority of the carries in 2022 and is also the most effective 49ers running back as of now. The only question I have right now is there is just a lot to give because you have not only the three names I mentioned, but you also have Deebo Samuel, who I still envision will get a couple of carries a game just based on how he was used last year and how effective it was in his role once that contract situation is finalized. Not only that, you have Trey Lance, and Trey Lance's comfortability, at least what it was last season, was at first rushing. And I'm not saying that that's what he chose to do, but when you look at the game plan that Kyle Shanahan implemented, especially in his first start, he had a lot of designed runs because he wanted to give what Trey Lance was comfortable with during his NDSU time before implementing more of the game plan or more of the playbook as the season went along. You obviously saw Lance stand in the pocket 23 times against Houston, and I'm expecting a lot more of that in 2022. But he's also a threat with his legs, and even if it's not a designed run, he has the ability to take off as well on RPO type of plays or on play action type of plays as well. So to me, there's a lot to give around. You haven't had a rusher eclipse 156 carries, and even if you average 5 yards a carry, which is higher than Elijah Mitchell had in 2021, you still have to get 200 carries in a season. And just given Elijah Mitchell's issues with durability, which I've heard the 49ers have had a real concern with, there is a question whether he can eclipse that 1,000-yard mark. Now, on the positive note for Elijah Mitchell, I think there are several things to name. Elijah Mitchell was a very, very effective first-down rusher last year. On first and 10 situations with significant volume, he averaged 5.3 yards per carry, which is a lot for a first down situational rusher in which last year the 49ers were one of the more rush-heavy teams. And at least it was a lot more predictable when they were rushing on first down, right? Elijah Mitchell, though, his wear and tear was shown throughout the first and second half of the game. In the first half, he was effective, rushing for 5.1 yards per carry. But in the second half, he waned his production, going to 4.3 yards per carry. I wonder if that remains in 2022. Now, with Trey Lance in the fold, I think Mitchell will be more effective. I do agree that Mitchell will be a better running back in 2022. I just don't think he sees the volume necessarily to eclipse 1,000 yards, even though I think the 49ers running game will be better in 2022 than 2021.
Yeah, and it's a very fair point. Like he does have to see at least 200 carries, a little over 200 to be able to do that. I'm basing it off of him averaging about 12 carries per game, which is a big if because all the other years in Shanahan's it's right around 8 carries per game, 8 to 9 carries per game for the heavy hitters. So for me, I think one, that I am assuming he gets 12. Now, to go to your point where the production dropped in the second half, I do think a lot of that has to play with what the offense was able to do last year as well, right? So this wasn't a very prolific offense, to be nice. This team did struggle a lot to score points in the first half. So the second half, they did have to try to probably air the ball out a little bit more. Obviously, if the rushing attack is the only thing that's going well for the team in the second half, they're going to stack the box and make it harder for the rushing attack to be that. So I do think that this team last season did become very one-dimensional and a lot of on offense, and I think that does play a role in why the second half maybe wasn't as prolific as the first half. I do think with Trey Lance there and his ability to throw the ball down deep, as well as his mobility in the pocket and ability to scramble will lead to a more multi-dimensional type offense, which will keep these running backs, giving them lanes to be able to run where their production doesn't drop in the second half.
And one other thing to point out in your favor, one thing that Elijah Mitchell did struggle with in 2021 was running out of the shotgun. In 51 carries, he rushed for only 3.6 yards per carry. Now, what's the difference with Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance in the shotgun? Well, if it's Jimmy Garoppolo in the shotgun and it's a handoff situation, you know that guy in Elijah Mitchell is going to run the ball. Whereas if it's Trey Lance, you have that RPO availability because Trey Lance can run the ball. And the 49ers did have Trey Lance run on RPO situations last year. So I think that there is a bit of a difference in the two. And I think that that's just going to make Elijah Mitchell more effective because defenses can't get that first jump on the running back because there are two different angles at which the 49ers can attack the situation. Additionally, I think that the biggest thing with Elijah Mitchell is just Trent Williams. And Trent Williams has remained durable during his 49ers career. So that's another thing that Elijah Mitchell has to his benefit because he rushes best when he rushes behind Trent Williams. And Mike McGlinchey will return next year, which should make the right side also more effective.
I agree. I think Mike McGlinchey is one of the most underrated re-additions, I guess, that people are kind of going underneath the radar because, the replacement there, Tom Compton last year, did a decent job, but McGlinchey healthy is a really big asset, especially in the running game. And so him coming back and all the signals is that he's going to be fresh and healthy. I think that that's a good sign for whoever ends up running the ball the most. I think just overall the rushing attack will be better with Mike McGlinchey there on the right side.
Yeah. And Mike McGlinchey is a great segue to our next point because he right now, his status and how much he'll play is currently unknown ahead of training camp. That might be a cause for concern to some. I don't know if it is for you, but overall, what are your main concerns heading into training camp?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have any huge concerns. So this is just because we have to pick one. But if I am picking one, it's going to be the offensive line just because that's the one we have the biggest question marks in. Now, I'm not somebody who thinks this offensive line is going to be terrible. I actually think they're going to be just as good and they're going to be fine because I do believe in Aaron Banks. I think that he's put in a lot of work and you could just tell based off of how he looks now that he's very focused and serious. And I think a lot of what hit the knock on was him switching from left guard to right guard. Now he's going to be in the position that he's grown up playing and played in college at left guard. And I think he's going to do very, very well, especially alongside Trent Williams there, who's the best offensive lineman in the game. I also feel very similarly about Jake Brendel, even though he's not necessarily, I think, the long-term solution, Rohan, for the 49ers at center. I do think that he's a viable center. I do think his athleticism is going to bode well, especially in the running game. And he has a lot of rapport with Trey Lance because that's the center that's been giving him the ball the most in Trey Lance's NFL career. So I do think that both of those positions are going to be fine. Brunskill is going to be Brunskill. He's not going to be overly great, but not going to be terrible either. And then I do believe McGlinchey is going to be there, or whomever does fill in for McGlinchey in the meantime until he gets officially healthy, we'll be fine. So overall, I think the offensive line will be okay. But if I am picking what is, the biggest question mark or where are causes for concern, I'm going to have to go with the offensive line.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, right? A cause for concern. I'm a little more optimistic than most on the offensive line. I've spoke about Jake Brendel. I think that honestly, he's not. I don't think I'm as concerned as others on him, just because of the connection with Trey Lance and just because he fits what the 49ers want an offensive lineman with the athleticism that he has and the intelligence that he has. I think that both could be factors, as well as the 49ers expressing willingness to keep him and retain him over the last 2 years, including going back and re-signing him after he opted out during the COVID year, because they felt that he was a viable backup at center. The right guard situation is something that I'm very intrigued in, because we don't know what is going to happen right now. Is Daniel Brunskill healthy from knee tendonitis? Is Jalen Moore ready to take over as that first team guy if he isn't? And what's going to happen if and when Brunskill returns? Who ends up getting that top spot? Because one thing that I pointed out this weekend, Brunskill has not had any run with Trey Lance. And I don't think the right guard relationship with the quarterback is as important as the center, but it is a change schematically. Will Brunskill be ready to handle it when he comes back? I believe he will, but I think he needs more time. He kind of needs more time to at least go through it with reps, and that will, in my opinion, be one of the more intriguing training camp battles. But as for a main concern for me, right now, I don't think it's necessarily a concern, but I think it's more of an interesting thing. Just putting a positive spin on it. What will the 49ers do if Javon Kinlaw doesn't kind of respond as well immediately? Remember last year, the 49ers wanted Javon Kinlaw to handle one-on-one situations, and it didn't necessarily work out as well. He couldn't get in as many reps, and obviously he was shut down for the year after a couple of games. If Javon Kinlaw doesn't work out immediately, and I feel a lot hinges on him this season, what's the backup plan, and how do the 49ers move forward? Is it going to be even more heavier rotation than they already have? Will Armstead be forced to play even more snaps on the interior? What will they do?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that they'll be fine there. I think that they have guys on the roster that by committee can be productive there. I mean, DJ Jones wasn't DJ Jones when they first got him, right? He just came out and played well. I think, Kinlaw, we haven't seen him be somebody that we could depend on quite yet, but it hasn't necessarily affected the defensive line's production either, right? So I think, guys like Hargrove, we're talking about it later. Omenihu, who might be able to play in there. A guy like Jordan Willis, who might be able to play inside, outside. And they still have Maurice Hurst. They have, other guys there that have been in the system maybe for a year that are coming back more healthy this season. So I do think by committee they should be fine at that position. But obviously Kinlaw is a first-round draft pick. We've been waiting on him. This is going to be his third year in the league. It would be nice to see him be able to go out there and show why the 49ers had such faith in him to trade away a guy that was beloved by the team, and then, go in and draft him over some guys that could have been impact players for the 49ers as well. So I think this is a year that Kinlaw understands he really needs to, go out there and show out. He's been pretty vocal about that, right? Especially in the 49ers content creator universe, as well as just in the media in general. So he's put a lot of pressure on himself. So I kind of feel like when a player does that, especially with the way he's gone about doing that, we could expect good play out of him.
Right. And that's why, again, it's hard to find really a concern, as more of something that just you kind of look at and see what can you make of this situation. And that kind of leads to the training camp battles that I want to talk about. And I pointed out one at right guard. To you, what are the most intriguing training camp battles?
Yeah, so there's going to be a few for me. I think the ones that are like easy to talk about are who's going to play the nickel, right? And who's going to be alongside Jimmy Ward in safety, right? Because those are like, along with what you mentioned as far as right guard. But for me, I think the battles, which might be just the nerd in me, Rohan, the battles for me are not necessarily who's going to be the starter. It's who's going to make the roster. And I think that there's a lot of talent in a few different positions that I want to see who actually makes it. And the two position groups that I'm really interested in is the cornerbacks and the defensive line. Those are the two that I'm really interested in seeing who actually makes the roster. And more, if I'm even going to go even further, it's the cornerback room, because I think this is the most stacked cornerback talent that the 49ers have ever had, especially under Kyle Shanahan, but had maybe in the last 2 decades, as far as just the depth and the amount of talent that's there. And usually they stick with 6 guys, and I think there's more than 6 guys, or 6 guys, right? They go with 6 usually, and I think there's more than 6 there that are needing to be on the roster, just because you don't want to lose them through free agency or through the waiver wire. And for me, that's going to be interesting, because if I know that and I'm interested in that, the players have to know that as well. So I think that's going to be one of the most exciting battles out there. Thing that I would want to get the most, especially with guys like you that are going to be out there, really who's showing out, who's looking good, and who's on the bubble, right? Is a guy like Lenore, who we all were pretty high on last year, is he even going to make the squad? Does the 2 rookies in Womack and Tariq Castro Fields, are they going to be good enough to make the team? So there's a lot in that cornerback room to me that I think is most interesting for me.
And that's why I agree with Mariah here, who said this is going to be one of the best training camps I can remember, because there are so many stacked spots, right? And it's not only the position battles between each group, it's also how many do the 49ers carry in one position to help carry them more or less in another position, right? Like, we've got a defensive line that is stacked probably 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, name how many ever guys that you could potentially make an argument for making the roster. I think they're carrying 17 or 18 right now on that defensive line. But then again, they carried 11 last year, and they're more deep this year. Can they afford to carry as many this year? I don't know. Cornerbacks wise, you said it. They weren't deep last year. Their last guy, I honestly forget his name. I know it was Harris, but they didn't carry Dante Johnson. I think it was like Devontae Harris was their 6th cornerback, and now he's not on an NFL roster, right? Now you can really make an argument for 6, 7, 8 guys in that cornerback room to potentially make the roster. And so really there's so many battles like everywhere and anywhere on this roster. At honestly every position that you could make an argument for. At quarterback, QB2, who's going to be that guy? At running back, who are the 4 that are going to make it out of the 6 that could potentially make the roster, right? Wide receiver, tight end, everywhere there is some battle or another that's going to be happening, which is why this 49ers roster is so deep and really so exciting heading into the 2022 campaign.
Right. I agree with you. And, we mentioned just too, like, we could see guys switching positions just to have to make the roster as well. So it's going to be very interesting, what happens. Maybe we see some trades as well, right? That's going to be kind of interesting as well, because the 49ers aren't shy from maybe making some trades for some future depth as far as draft picks. So lot to pay attention to.
Definitely. And I mean, just real quick, off the record, and off what we were going to really originally talk about, you talk about a trade. I'm not going to ask you to name a player off the top of your head, but out of a position group off the top of your head, what position group do you think you can envision one trade happening this offseason at the end of training camp with the 49ers?
Linebacker.
Me too. Yeah.
I just think the 49ers have a lot of depth there. I mean, clearly they're stacked as far as their top 3, and I think they already have a 4th there. I think they're only going to keep 5, and they have like 3 guys there, 2 rookies, and then Flanagan Fowles, who I think you were the person who talked about, he might be the most likely to be traded. I think that is true. Not only can he be a guy that can come into another team's linebacking room and be impactful there, but also his ability on special teams. So to me, that would be, I know you said not to mention a player, but that's a guy that you brought up on multiple shows for us. And that's some guy that I really eye to be that, be the most likely to be traded.
Exactly. I actually, yeah, like you said, I mentioned it, and I think that is the group that will also see a trade. You could see it on the defensive line too because of the amount of people that we have, but I think it's linebacker. Like you said, I honestly think it's Demetrius Flanagan-Fouts. Demetrius Flanagan-Fouts has been a stellar guy on what do you call it? On shoot, what is it again? I just
Special
mind
teams?
blank. Special teams. There we go. Too much football in me that I have blanked like that. But he's been stellar on special teams for the last 2 years. 64% of the defensive snaps, special team snaps in 2020, 75% in 2021. On top of that, he's got the athleticism for a linebacker. He's got the traits, right? He's got the tackling ability, the athleticism. He just hasn't been given the opportunity because the 49ers have had just stacked linebackers, and other players have gotten opportunity elsewhere when they've been traded. Jonas Griffith last year balled out in preseason, got traded for a 6th-round pick to Denver, and then now he's probably making a good impact in 2022, right? Flanagan-Fouts, he's more pro-ready, really, in my opinion, than Griffith. He has more on his track record, and if he balls out again this preseason, I can envision a trade. And it's not necessarily because the 49ers don't need Flanagan-Fouts. Moreover, it's really because the 49ers have guys waiting in the corner for their name to be called. And I think that a lot of them can earn an opportunity, specifically the undrafted guys or second-year player Curtis Robinson, who I think could make an impact for the 49ers. He shined in training camp, he shined in OTAs, could shine again in training camp. And to me, I'm a huge fan of Jeremiah Gemmel, the UNC linebacker, huge fan of Segun Olabi. I think that he could really make an impact out of San Diego State. And then also there's Marcelina Mccrary Ball, a safety convert linebacker. And remember what the 49ers did last year? They had Marcel Harris, a safety, turned linebacker, and played him in 36% of their defensive snaps. They like guys with athleticism. They like guys with coverage skills. And I think that all three of those guys can make an impact on this team if they made the roster.
And the fact that, one, they do covet that, those later picks, 5th and 6th round draft picks, they do covet those to have a lot of those available because they seem to find gems in that area as well. Again, linebacker is a group that they develop very, very well, right? Demetrius Flanagan-Fouts, we mentioned, undrafted free agent. Azeez Al-Shaair, undrafted free agent. You mentioned a couple others, undrafted free agents that they brought in. They've been able to develop these guys. And they brought in a guy like Oren Burks already that to come in and maybe replace Flanagan-Fouts' production or maybe even upgrade it on special teams. And he's probably first up off of the bench out of the top 3 that we talked about because of the contract that they got him and, what he's capable of doing. So for me, it's more like Flanagan-Fouts is odd man out, probably too good to be a guy that doesn't play that much for this roster because of how stacked they are. So might as well, you bought very low because he's undrafted free agent, sell high, get a 5th or a 6th round draft pick out of that. That's the way to continue, elevating as far as the 49ers. So I just think that more than likely that's somebody that we could see go elsewhere because of all the names you mentioned that they're ready to develop and turn into the next Flanagan-Fouts.
Exactly. Love what you're saying here. And that kind of leads us to the final part because we're talking about trades, right? And we said it, the defensive line is the deepest group. Earlier today, just an hour ago, there was a great interview by my guy, Brad Graham, BSF Niners. He's been doing a hell of a job interviewing all sorts of 49er players. Interviewed one of my favorites, defensive end Charles Menehue, who is poised for a bigger role in 2022 after being acquired in a midseason trade last year from the Houston Texans. What are your thoughts on Charles Menehue heading into the 2022 season?
Yeah, Charles Omenihu has what I think is like the secret sauce for how the 49ers kind of tend to just hit on these type of guys, right? They got him, mid-season last year, and he was pretty productive near the tail end of the season. I think he ended up with a sack and a half, and and played decent in the postseason as well. This is a guy who finally feels like he has the opportunity to really show what he's capable of. And defensive linemen, I think, know now if you play and get the opportunity to play for the 49ers and really showcase yourself, there's just been a track record of year after year, guys that other teams pluck from the 49ers that go out there and are able to, cash out and get a big deal, right? So I personally think Omenihu fits in that role. I'm really high on a guy like Jordan Willis. I try to plug him as many opportunities as I can. I see him a lot like how Omenihu is. These are guys that are extremely athletic, can play both inside and outside, that are hungry, that haven't, really made it, quote unquote, yet, but do feel like they have the ability to. These are guys that Costa Rica just loves to mold, develop, and really showcase out. I think Omenihu could be somebody who might be, 4 to 8 sacks, depending on the type of playing time that he gets. And, is somebody who could really either really put pressure on the 49ers to have to re-sign him if he comes back on like a cheaper deal, or that goes out there and gets the bag somewhere else because he's young, he's athletic, he's hungry. Even in his exit interview last year, he was really speaking highly about what he's going to be able to do this year with a full season with the 49ers and a full training camp and whatnot. I just think these are one of the guys that Costa Rica just shines, they look like a lump of coal, shines them into, a diamond. And I just feel like Omenihu has everything going for him to have a really good season this season.
Yeah, I really like Charles Menehue. I thought last year he was a great acquisition midseason. He had one of the higher pressure rates out of all players in the NFL when he was traded to the 49ers, and he maintained that when he was with the 49ers despite having limited snaps. He was playing pretty well for Houston, comes over for a 6th-round pick, and his most notable game was the Dallas Cowboys game where he had 6 pressures, playing in only 47% of the defensive snaps. Now, in 2022, I expect him to start off really hot rather than come in and have a bit of an adjustment period. Earlier today, Omenihu himself said it was a huge adjustment, more than I anticipated, because he's coming into a completely different scheme, different city, different players, and he really felt only comfortable with the 49ers in OTAs this season, in minicamp and OTAs, and throughout this offseason program. He really just got into his element now. And so when you see what he had, the potential that he had last year, along with the pressure rates and the statistics, compiled with now him being fully ready, I think he's on the verge of a breakout season in a way in Omenihu standards for 2022. And San Francisco is really looking for that Arden Key replacement, in my opinion. We lost Arden Key right on a 1-year deal to Jacksonville, and he had 8 sacks for the 49ers last season. But the biggest thing for Arden Key was he's a versatile guy. He played on the edge, but he also played on the interior. And Omenihu has a good frame and good athleticism where he can play in that similar role, where it's not only he's playing in a 5-tech or a 6-tech role like he was in Houston. Instead, he's spread out. He can play the 9-tech. He can come in and play the 5-tech. He can play in different roles and really increase that snap count and be an impact player for the 49ers.
Yeah. Only thing against Charles Omenihu is he's not Jordan Willis. And I think Jordan Willis is going to get a lot of those opportunities.
There you go. And real quick before we end today's thing, give me your spiel on Jordan Willis and why you think he might be an impact player in 2022. I want to hear.
Yeah, so Jordan Willis is kind of like what Charles Omenihu was before Charles Omenihu. The only problem is he obviously had some off the field issues that caused him to be suspended for 7 games last season. And because of that, he had a slow start. But when he was in the thick of things, when you talk about his production, and this is something that a lot of people get at me, but his production, as far as the amount of snaps he had to the amount of production that he got from those snaps, was very similar to a guy that a lot of people like in Khalil Mack, right? So he had a very similar production. He also had a statement game, right, where he basically on his own shoulders, I think, turned around and then ended up winning a game for the 49ers in the playoffs. And that was what he was able to do on special teams against Green Bay. He was the guy that, was able to clear out the dude so that Jimmy Ward could go in there and block the field goal late in the second half. And then also he was the guy who ended up, being able to be really impactful in that blocked punt as well. I think he might have been the one that blocked it. So for me, that's just a guy that has the type of motor that could be in the trenches. I think he's super athletic. He's amazingly humble. He understands this opportunity. I do believe he's going to get more production, and he's already shown that he could be very impactful. So for me, Jordan Willis is somebody who I think is going to have a breakout season this year and probably be what Arden Key, DJ Jones ended up doing last season, where he goes out and gets the bag somewhere else next year.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Jordan Willis does make the roster in 2022. I mean, training camp will obviously determine more, but I think Jordan Willis does make the roster specifically because he plays well on special teams. I think he's a good special teams candidate for 2022. We saw what he did in the Green Bay game. I think his length is very important on special teams. I'm not sure as much as you about his role on the defense. I just think there are a ton of candidates, and I prefer a couple of the other ones. But I think Willis will definitely have a role in 2022 with the 49ers and potentially could be a guy that could be here as a special team stalwart for years to come.
I think he had more sacks last year than your boy Omenihu. So
yeah, but then again, it's the transition period. He did have 3 sacks. Omenihu had 2, but then again, sacks aren't everything. 6 pressures against Dallas Cowboys. But we'll have our little Willis Omenihu debate behind the scenes as well. As always, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. This has been a great episode, and our final episode before training camp begins. It has been announced Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch will be speaking to reporters on tomorrow at 11 a.m. at Levi Stadium. On top of that, they announced that practice will start Wednesday at 10:25 a.m. I will be there. We will have a report for you Wednesday night. Thank you guys so much, and we'll catch you guys next time. Peace.